My name is Avis Jolly. I'm from the Eldorado Community Foundation. I was hired about a year and a half ago as the impact officer. And really this first year and a half, I've spent coaching and working with various nonprofits as far as their structure and organizations to be effective and efficient. Because the better you guys are, the better our community is and stuff. So this year we decided to really blow this out big and do a class series for everyone rather than all this little one-on-one I was doing with just various little entities here and there. With that class structure, I think now's a good point. We're more than halfway through the classes. At the end of this, if you have attended or had attendance from your organization in all 5, you will be eligible to apply for a capacity grant. And different from most of the other grants you're used to, this will not have to do with project or program. This will have to do with you and your capacity for your organization. Whether you need software to do something, whether you need a web designer or a different role to actually pay for a role. That's something that is usually hard to find in grants. So that's one thing you guys will be eligible for. So we've been through governance at the very beginning, then we went into organizational structure. Last week we went into some about the money and fund development with Lois and Kathy Haven. And today we are going to get into marketing and communications. So you've come up with that mission, you know what you want to do, and you kind of have a plan for fundraising and stuff. And now how do you, going back to my car analogy, how do you, put those bumper stickers on and make sure people know that you are there and what you do for both your clients as well as what you do for donors who might want to support you. So, we will turn this over to Chris Ringness, who is with the Community Foundation, and he is going to lead this one today. He is one that's been with us for a while and has moved into the last year into our PR position, really much full time with the Eldorado Community Foundation. So manages all of our social media, all of our press, manages our blog whenever we're doing blogs and stuff and newsletters. That is all Chris. So Chris, take it away. Oh, one more thing, housekeeping. Make sure you use the chat. Any questions, anything. Kathy's online today again, who's our grants coordinator up out of South Shore, and also a nonprofit extraordinaire person who's always been involved. We will really be managing this chat and answering all your questions. And then anything that we think Chris really needs to answer, we will gather those and give those to him at the end to make sure he answers those. So again, thank you for being here. And Chris, it's all yours.
Thank you, Avis, and thank you everyone else for joining us this morning. Let me just move this out of my way. So welcome to Building a Better Nonprofit, class number 4, Communication and Public Relations. There we go. I had to get it to respond there. So first of all, let's talk about the goals of this class today. First goal is going to be understanding the importance of good communication to your various audiences, including how to identify and engage those audiences. What are they looking at? What platforms do they engage with? And how to keep their attention in a fast-paced world. The next goal will be learning to develop consistency within your messaging using branding across all platforms and communication methods. We'll also dive into developing good branding for those of you that are in the very early stages of your development as a nonprofit, with hopefully some tips that will help those of you that are more established nonprofits as well. Additionally, we'll talk about leveraging your impact within your messaging, why it is important, and who should be your focus. I'll help you to understand the best practices when developing your presence on various platforms, including your own website. We'll discuss pitfalls to avoid, as well as ways to get the most mileage out of the content you create for your audiences. We'll also hear from a special guest with tips and tricks about how to engage with local media, including tips on how to go about getting your story out there. Finally, we'll talk about how to utilize all of the tools at your disposal, including some examples of some free tools that you can utilize to help you create great content, extend your reach, all without breaking your budget. think I went one too far. There we go. So first, let's take a minute and define the types of communication and identify exactly what we'll be talking about today. So internal versus external communication. Good internal communication is incredibly important, but not really the focus of today's class. Briefly though, good internal communication starts at the top, needs to be clear, detailed, and specific. Internal communication that is vague and open to interpretation, at best, wastes the time of those you communicate with while they seek clarification, and at worst, generates undesired results. Now, I mentioned this because these same principles apply to your external communication, but in a less measurable way. Externally, those you communicate poorly with are less likely to seek clarification from you and more likely to simply disengage with you altogether. Now, good external communication, what does that look like? It has the qualities I just mentioned, being clear, detailed, and specific, but there's some other key things you want to aim for with your external audiences. Engaging communication. Always be thinking about ways that you can get your audience to want to interact with your messaging. Sometimes this is going to be a call to action, or a link back to your website, or a request for comments, discussion, feedback. There's lots of ways to make your message more engaging. Give your audiences a reason not to throw away your mailer or scroll right past your social media post. Good external communication should also be meaningful. This goes back to what I said a moment ago, giving your audience a reason to read your content or view your content. Sending out a holiday card, for instance, to your donors is great, but including an impactful story about how their donations made a difference in the life of one of your clients gives them a reason to give your card more than just a cursory glance before tossing it in the bin. And it'll leave a more lasting impression on their memory. Always be thinking about making your messaging and content meaningful. Impactful storytelling is one of the best ways to do this. Finally, patting yourself on the back in your external communication is okay when appropriate, but you should not always be the focus. This might seem counterintuitive, but beyond a brief reiteration of your mission and/or your program, the focus should be on your audience. What did they achieve through you? Make your success their success. Those you impact are the focus, and your donors are the heroes that make it possible. Always remember that. And finally, the third kind of communication I just want to touch on briefly because of its importance is cross-agency and cross-organization communication. These communications kind of sit in between internal and external. And while this type of communication isn't really the focus of this class, I do want to stress their importance. Collaboration of our efforts as a nonprofit community, both with other nonprofits who serve similar needs, as well as with local government agencies, only benefits those that we serve. Viewing each other as competitors and refusing to form those relationships through good cross-organization and cross-agency communication does nothing but hurt our mission to serve the community. I know we're all passionate about the roles that we fill within community. We wouldn't be in the nonprofit sector if this wasn't the case. This type of communication and relationship building is critical. If we were all in a room together right now, I would tell you all to look around and identify another organization you think might be able to collaborate with you in the future and make it your 2022 New Year's resolution to reach out to them and see how you can work together. In fact, even though we're not all in a room together, do that. Look through, scroll through the audience, see who's here, see what other organizations might be of similar mindset and have similar missions to you, and reach out to them and do just that. That's going to take us actually to our first poll. So we'll go ahead and get that launched. Does your organization collaborate with other organizations and agencies that serve similar community needs? Yes, we do. No, we don't. Not yet, but now that you said something about it, we're definitely going to. Take a moment and let me know. And those of you that are saying, no, we don't, maybe share in chat why you don't, and why you're not answering that, not yet, but we'll definitely look into it now. I'm very curious to know, and maybe some introspection on your part would be a good idea too, to share and let us know. Looks like we're at about 78% having participated. Come on, we can get the numbers up a little higher than that. I know it's early. Okay, we'll go ahead and stop that poll and share the results really quick. So I am really interested in those two who stated that no, they don't collaborate with other organizations and agencies. I'd love to know why. I'd love to know the reasoning why. I mean, not necessarily that that you're in detention or anything, but yeah, I'd be very interested to know why. So I'll be looking over the chat to hopefully see that.
Chris, I'll go ahead and share one just quickly.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
We had one group that is actually part of a national organization, and they actually were told by their national that they should not collaborate with other organizations. And I was just going to put in the chat, I would say, I'd ask your national why. You know, maybe they have some good thoughts behind that, but then also it might give them a reason to pause and go, you know. Because especially being you know, every geographic area is different. So I'd be curious to know why national is saying, no, maybe not.
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that.
You bet.
Okay. All right, well, just give me one moment here. Between polls, I am going to need to switch to the next poll to prepare it and get it ready for launch. So now we're going to move on to defining your audience. So referencing this picture here, your audience might not be as big of an army as this one is, but if your content that you feed them is meaningful, impactful, and pertinent to them and their lives, you'll find that they'll be cheering for you just as hard, wishing for your success, and buying into your mission. So let's go ahead and identify our audiences. First of all, your donors. For most of you, these are the bread and butter of your funding development. You want to find ways to effectively connect with them, and we'll definitely talk about that on a general level, but what resonates with your donors is going to be related to your mission, and so it's going to be different for each of you. One constant, though, for everyone is that donors want to see results. They want to know that their donations are meaningful and impactful, and that means articulating your impact back to them. Always be looking for impact stories that you can share. Feed them data in bite-sized amounts, one, to help them digest the data, but to also help them understand their impact and make them feel their importance. The next type of audience is going to be your clients, who you serve. What service do you provide them? Ultimately, this subset is far too varied for me to give any real specific examples, and in some cases, like with, say, animals and the environment, it might take some creativity on your part to articulate exactly what your client base is and how to communicate with them. And this communication will look very different than communication with your donors. This is where you articulate the programs that you offer and the benefits that they'll have to the community members in need of your services. The third subset of community, not really a subset, but mostly the community as a whole. This includes existing donors and existing clients, as well as potential future donors and clients, and includes everyone else as well. This audience is a good target for generalized who you are and what you do mass communications. But how do you really target an audience that doesn't necessarily know you exist? General advertising and pushing your message out there might reach a few people. However, they can be reached over time in a much more critical way through your actions and the good PR that comes with it. The community is always watching, and your engagement will absolutely build the community's understanding of who you are and what you do. This is something that can't be forced, but is as easy as saying yes and showing up where you're needed. A good example of this in action, the Eldorado Community Foundation might be a household name within the nonprofit community here in El Dorado County, but the vast majority of the community didn't know we existed until events over the last couple of years have thrust us into the forefront of community. Between providing small business grants with COVID relief funding, to our immediate response to financial need as a result of the Caldor fire, the Eldorado Community Foundation is much more widely known within the community these days than it ever has been before. A small word of caution though, step up, but don't get ahead of your skis, as Bill would love to say. Know your capacity and your limits, because while your successes stick in the community's mind, so will your failures. You want to build credibility as an organization within the community's mind, and failures can stick with you even longer than successes can. So now we're going to talk about branding and building a strong brand and an overall message. We all know that a strong brand is important, but why is a strong brand important? It's important because you want to stand out. You want to build recognition of your organization within the public space. Good nonprofit branding helps you stand out and helps you get your message across. Branding can help your organization become memorable, increasing visibility, and generating support. Beyond that, strong nonprofit branding can drive your long-term strategic goals, including public trust and an increase in awareness about your cause and the work that you do. Your branding is your logo, your website, your mission, your publications, and how you present yourself across all the different spaces that you occupy. Consistency and cohesion within your branding across all the spaces you occupy is critical to building public's recognition of who you are and what you do. So how do you build that strong branding? Well, it depends on where you are in the process. Some of you are very well-established organizations who already have a strong brand recognition within the community. But for those of you that are still new and in the process of developing your brand identity and are wondering where to begin, here's some general tips. First of all, take a look at your organizational mission and who your audience is. What can you pull out of your mission that will resonate with people? It can be a good idea to reach out to your donors, your volunteers, and your board members to get their input as well. Review your goals and any organizational strategy documents you might have for any clues as to how to build this. When building your branding, it's very important to know who exactly are you trying to reach, so you can tailor your communication to meet their needs. Get very specific with this. Write out their interests, their lifestyles, their motivations. This will benefit not only your brand building process, but it'll also have a positive impact rather on other areas of your nonprofit's work. This kind of introspection into your nonprofit can help you focus yourself organizationally. Second, consistency is key in your branding. Maintaining consistency in your color schemes, your logo placement, logo usage, your font, and your language are all critical to this. Keep consistency on your website, your social media, infographics, newsletters, brochures, flyers, emails, all of your correspondence. It's important to have a branded donation page linked from your website as well, as opposed to just a generic checkout page. If a donor goes to a generic checkout page that doesn't have your branding on it, they may not even associate it with you. And it may make them less likely to donate in the end. In addition, keeping your branding and your logo consistent across all channels is important. It's also important to keep your messaging consistent. There's almost no such thing as repeating your mission too many times. This is especially the case if you're running an awareness or a fundraising campaign. Consistency is what creates easy recognition and fosters loyalty and trust within the community. Every interaction you have, online and offline, with your donors, board members, volunteers, your partners, is an opportunity to build relationships and strengthen your brand. To help with this consistency, it's a good idea to create a simple nonprofit branding guide that outlines your main design elements, the typography, logo, and other elements of your brand. Make sure that this guide includes rules for what's allowed and what isn't when it comes to using those elements online and offline. For example, you could make it clear that your logo is not to be stretched out or used against specific backgrounds or colors. Even if you have a strong established brand, it would be a good idea to review your current print and digital content. Make sure that your branding is cohesive, and if it's not, make a plan to make adjustments so that it is. This is something that I'm personally always cognizant of with the foundation's branding. Third, having an impressive logo is important to branding as well, as it becomes the centerpiece of your brand. It's usually the thing that people remember and recognize you by, and what creates their association with your brand. Designing a great logo isn't easy. A great logo is going to be simple but compelling, moving and relatable, memorable, and communicating who you are all in one. Before designing your logo, reflect on your nonprofit's mission and vision, and perhaps even summarize your goals in a couple of words. This will help you brainstorm colors, symbols, images, and words that best represent your organization. When designing the logo, don't make it too overwhelming. Use white and negative space to create a balance of elements. If you choose to use typography for your logo, be careful when selecting the font. Make sure it's easy to read, and remember to stay consistent. Number 4, using storytelling as a tool is incredibly important. Successful nonprofit branding convinces both the head and touches the heart of your audience. To convince the head, make sure that your nonprofit is transparent, clear, and communicative with its supporters and donors. Share frequently about your impact, answer your supporters' questions, demonstrate how donation money is spent, using facts, data, and impact measurement to show your donors and supporters why and how your organization is doing good within the community is critical to convincing the head. So that's the head. What about the heart? So while numbers matter and facts matter, you also need to touch the hearts of your audience, and storytelling is one of the most powerful ways to do this. It can help you build meaningful relationships with your audience. It creates trust and credibility and helps your organization stand out. Some general storytelling tips. Tell authentic stories. It's easy to differentiate, it's very easy to differentiate between a sales pitch and a genuine story. So make sure that your story is authentic. And don't forget about visual storytelling, particularly video. It's one of the most effective mediums to relay your message and touch the heart. Always have a central character to your story. This can be a beneficiary of your organization or someone whose life you've changed, but it's much easier for people to relate to an individual than it is for them to relate to large groups of people or an abstract concept. And finally, don't forget about community outreach. Community outreach is invaluable in building your brand. And sometimes it's the most important thing that you can do is just to show up. This has been a tough one these last couple of years with so many things going virtual, but as we hopefully start to get back to some form of normalcy, remember that your physical presence within the community can be one of the biggest drivers of building the trust and confidence of the community in your brand. So that takes us to our next poll. Go ahead and get that launched. Now that you've heard all about branding, how would you rate your organization's branding? I like this first answer. We're basically Google. Even newborns know who we are. Or our brand is pretty strong. I'd say we're a household name for the most part. Or maybe our brand could use some work, but it isn't in the worst shape. Or maybe it's definitely something that we need to work hard to improve. We're pretty unknown. Or what is the brand? Is that like for cattle? I'm seeing a lot in the middle here. Good. Nobody thinks they're Google. That's important, because realistically, none of us as nonprofits, I think, are at that level. Maybe a couple of the nationally known organizations. I'm also glad to see that nobody's in the last category either.
Hey, Chris, as they're finishing up on this one, we got an interesting one in the chat as they finish that one up, is we have a entity that is actually part of a national entity that has created a logo for their local level. Would you advise of that, or should they stick with the national logo? Any thoughts?
I definitely have some thoughts on that. It depends on a similarity to the national logo or not. If it's completely different than the national logo, that's probably not the best idea. If it incorporates the national logo into building I'd say, for instance, something I'm going to get into a little bit later is the use of a tagline. If it's say the national logo and then just has a tagline, say the, a good example, Big Brothers Big Sisters. Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Northern Sierra, I believe, is the full. And if it's just the Big Brothers Big Sisters logo, that's one thing. But if it's Big Brothers Big Sisters and has of the Northern Sierra as a tagline, or as a subsection of that logo, that's perfectly fine, because it's still the national logo. It just makes, in fact, I would argue that that's even better, because not only is it the national logo, but it also brings it to a local level.
And I'm even watching a few of the people shaking their heads yes on this. Reggie Shaw's like, yes, I agree with this.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
So it seems like even our fellow nonprofits are feeling that. Yep, that's a great way to go.
Yeah,
thanks, Chris.
I'm actually very curious to know which nonprofit that is. Which
organization? It is the I don't think they'll mind. Again, it's all about learning today. It's our Native Plant Society.
Oh, okay, all right. I'll go ahead and end this poll and share the results. We do have somebody that thinks they're Google. As I said, there's probably one or two here that are a national nonprofit and pretty widely known. Big Brothers Big Sisters probably one of those that I would categorize in that top level. But for the most part, yeah, you're mostly saying that your brand is could use some work, but it's not in the worst shape. Kind of middle of the road there. So that is kind of what I expected. Hopefully some of the tips that I just imparted can help you build that branding, as well as those that are in the, definitely something we need to work to improve. Now, I imagine some of you that are newer nonprofits, you're going to be in that, need to work to improve your branding department. And that's completely understandable. There's nothing wrong with that. Branding is something that name recognition is something that will come with time. It's not something that you're going to get overnight. Some of these nonprofits have been around for decades, and they're obviously going to be much more well-known within the community. So moving on to the different types of communication methods that I want to touch on today. Really all of them. First of all, printed communication. Printed communication can serve you well as professionally printed flyers or rack cards that are available at your office, or that you make available at events to help people better understand what you do, who you serve, and how they can help. Try to avoid waste when it comes to printed materials. Don't include information that'll quickly become dated or that'll lose relevance after a short period of time. In order to get the most out of this printed material, you're likely going to be printing it in bulk. And professionally printed material is going to do a lot more for you than something printed at home. Homebrew stuff can be really nice, but professionally printed material is going to put you on another level of professionalism, and you want to utilize that whenever possible. It will cost more money to do that, so this is why you want to make sure that anything you print will stay relevant long enough that you can distribute all of it.
you see that yesterday that I put on?
Sorry about that. It's like somebody wasn't muted. Printed material is also something that you can utilize in mailers to your donor database. Event announcements, save the dates, or that dirty word solicitations are common uses of mailed printed material. However, if you send solicitations, make sure that it is more than just an ask. Use the opportunity to inform the recipients about your organization, your mission, and most importantly, your impact. This is a great place to use storytelling. It's a great opportunity to communicate back to your donors what their generous donations have accomplished, so don't waste it. Next one is email communication. Email communication is going to be used as in a more informal manner as informal correspondence, but it can also be used to send out reminders of upcoming events, digital newsletters, save the dates, etc. And it can be used in a much more affordable way because it doesn't cost anything to send an email. The important thing to make sure that you do is collect emails from your donors and build a donor database whenever and wherever possible. Good digital communication relies on building a robust contact database. So always, always, always find a way to ask for an email. Large email blasts like newsletters can utilize resources like Constant Contact, but be careful when utilizing something like this. Resources like this can be a double-edged sword. They can make your content look more professional, but they can also make it look more like spam, both to email servers and to your audience. So just be careful when using something like that. They can be a good method for maintaining a database though. Social media, the necessary evil. Whether we like it or not, social media is an absolutely essential tool for communicating and messaging. Most people engage with one or another social media platform every day. So how do you capitalize on that interaction? What platforms serve what purposes? What platforms should you even be looking at? There's a ton of them out there, but we're going to focus today on what I call the big six: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok. That's only 5. You said big 6. We'll get to number 6 in a minute. First, I want to focus on the more traditional social media platforms and what their best uses are for those in the nonprofit sector. Of the traditional social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram are easily the ones you should focus on if you're only going to pick 2. Facebook comes in at over 70% of most demographics using it to some degree. That number falls off only at the 65 plus age range. When it comes to the younger demographics, 18 to 29 and 30 to 49, you're looking at a 50 to 70% usage on Instagram. So these two are absolutely critical to be using. Every nonprofit should be putting content out on Facebook and Instagram. The nice thing about these platforms too is, at least for the time being, you can cross-post using the same scheduler. So you open up your scheduler on Facebook and you can select Instagram to post that same content too. At least until the FTC decides to force Meta to sell Instagram, which I think is probably coming. We'll see if that functionality goes away. Something else to note, you may have seen recently that Facebook, for the first time ever in its history, has lost daily active users. You might say, well, Facebook's dying. Well, we're talking about 1.93 billion down to 1.92 billion daily active users. That's a quarter of the world's population using Facebook every single day. You need to have a presence there. The best uses for Facebook and Instagram are going to be frequent content posts, updating the community on what's going on, announcing events, programs, successes, celebrating donors, things like that. These are your bread and butter platforms. And because of the high usage rates of these platforms, they're good candidates for fundraising campaigns. They actually both have their own built-in fundraising campaigns as well, or fundraising mechanisms, I should say. Number 3 on the list of usage in terms of community usage is Twitter. Now, Twitter can be used as more of a direct line of communication with people who are interested in your cause. Think of it as a method of active dialogue with your followers rather than something that you schedule content for. Best uses for Twitter include direct dialogue with your following, sharing ideas, or relevant, time-sensitive, and important news with your followers. Coming in at number 4 is LinkedIn, and it's primarily going to be used for networking from a nonprofit standpoint. You could use this for information sharing and collaboration with other nonprofits that have intersecting missions. This goes back to that collaboration that we were talking about before. The best use for LinkedIn is going to be networking with other like-minded nonprofits. This is a great way to idea share. Treat LinkedIn like a think tank, especially in situations like we've been in for the past couple of years, where everyone is scrambling to find new and innovative ways to fundraise without gathering in person. Now, TikTok. If you're really trying to capture that 18 to 29-year-old demographic, TikTok is the fastest growing social media platform in that age range by a lot. So you're all going to want to start practicing your TikTok dance challenges. Best use for TikTok: accessing Gen Z and spreading your message among that age range, among the youth. This could actually be particularly beneficial for organizations whose mission involves youth. Organizations like Boys and Girls Club, Hands for Hope, and Big Brother Big Sister are potentially good candidates and could get use out of TikTok. So that's the 5 traditional social media platforms. What about that 6th one I mentioned? So what do you do about people who don't like social media and don't use it at all? How do you reach them? What if I told you that there was a social media platform used by over 80% of the US population, including people who don't use social media at all? Anyone guess what it is? It's YouTube. In an increasingly digital world, video is everywhere, and most people don't consider YouTube to be a social media platform at all, which really works to YouTube's advantage. Consider starting to put video content out there, even in the form of YouTube Shorts, if you aren't already. For those that don't know, YouTube Shorts are essentially YouTube's version of TikTok, but with the benefit of not being TikTok. YouTube is a platform that nobody thinks twice about using. We've all been using it for a decade and more, 2 decades and more. So you should absolutely have a presence there. The best use for this: it's an ideal platform for that storytelling. Video storytelling is so much more impactful than written storytelling because it hits more of the senses at once. It's more engaging with the viewer, so there's much more likelihood that they'll watch the whole way through, and they may even be compelled to share the video with others. So some general social media tips. Keep it short. Most social media platforms have a character limit, and they have a character limit for a reason. Some don't. But if you want to tell a long story, you can tease that story on your social media post and then link back to your website to have the full story and allow them to interact with your website. Doing this allows them the opportunity to dig further into your site and learn more about you. Also, leverage your other forms of communication to promote your social media by including QR codes, linking back to your social media pages on your printed materials. Also, include your social media links on email signatures so that every single email you send out has a chance of getting you new followers or subscribers. And finally, the key to all of this with social media is to make sure that the content you're putting out there is meaningful. I keep using this word meaningful. Make sure that what you're putting out there in everything, but especially social media, is meaningful. Nobody wants their social media feed filled with nonsense. Trust me, there's already enough nonsense out there on social media already. That takes us to our next poll. And I bet you guys can guess what it is. I'd like you all to share with me what social media platforms your organization uses. Check all that apply. This is a multiple choice one, so you can, I'm seeing a couple TikToks. All right. Okay, this is interesting. This, I think, is probably the poll I was the most interested in seeing the feedback from. 98% of you are using Facebook. That's great. Less 53% using Instagram. It's very interesting. The percentages are lining up very similar to the usage that we see demographics using these platforms throughout the country. Looks like we've got about 82% having responded so far. We'll go ahead and end it here and share the results. So it's very much what I expected. I'll be honest, I didn't expect to see 5 of you using TikTok. I'm guessing it's probably some of those organizations that do have youth-based missions. I'd be very curious if the 5 that clicked that they're using TikTok would share in the chat that they're the ones using TikTok. That would be interesting for me to find out and get data on. And I'm seeing only 44% of you using YouTube, so I think that's probably a number that should definitely be worked on. Again, remember, video content is incredibly powerful and incredibly important. Go ahead and jump over here to the next poll so that I have it queued up and ready, and move on to the next slide here. So now we're going to talk about your websites. More than virtually anything, your website is your public face. In today's world, it's going to be one of the first things that someone learning about your organization for the first time will see. Because of this, it's imperative that your website be professional, intuitive, easy to navigate, and comprehensive. Your website should be able to answer all of the frequently asked questions that somebody might have upon first learning about your existence. Who you are, what are you all about, what do you do, where can you be found, how do they contact you, and most importantly, why should they care? You have less than 1 minute on average to convince somebody visiting your website for the first time to stay and learn more. This means you need to make sure that your homepage or whatever landing page you link to grabs your visitors' attention. This is usually done through compelling imagery followed by meaningful and impactful language. You want your visitor to want to learn more. An intuitive and easy to navigate menu is another critical component of a good website. If you have trouble finding something on your own website, someone else definitely will too. A good idea might be to send out your website link to, say, your board members and ask them to find things. See if they can locate things easily. If they can't, maybe look at trying to make it a little bit more intuitive. Another thing to ensure is that your website content is responsive. Now, what responsive is, responsive means that it will automatically detect what kind of device it's being viewed on, like a smartphone or a tablet or a PC, and it will adapt its appearance accordingly, making sure that your user has a consistent experience across all devices. Now, most modern day website builders are inherently responsive in what they build and what they create. So usually this is something that's done for you. Excuse me, but it is still critical to ensure that your website works across multiple devices by testing it. Similarly, it's also important to make sure that your website works properly and gives a similar experience across all major web browsers. Now, there's a ton of web browsers out there, and the vast majority of them aren't actually even used within the US. The ones that you should really be concerned with are Chrome, Safari, Edge, Firefox, and to a lesser extent, Opera. Now, to keep you from having to download a whole bunch of different browsers to test on, there's actually free online tools out there that will emulate different browsers for you so that you can test your compatibility, your website's compatibility, load speeds, get error reports, things of that nature. There's one I actually recommend for this. It's called Comparium. It's free, it's comprehensive, easy to use, and it can also test device responsiveness for you. I'll send out the link to that when I send out all the materials from this class on Monday. So after your homepage, what typically do you think is the most visited page on most non-e-commerce websites? It's the Contact Us page. People want to know how to get in touch with you, and all methods of contact are important. None of them should be left out of your contact page. Having an email, even if it's just info at your domain, is critical because that's the most common means of communication for people visiting your website. Contact forms are important. A lot of people don't like contact forms though because they view them as impersonal. So just having a contact form in place of an email is not a good idea. But you should still give an option of a contact form because different people like to use different methods of communicating. Different people will want to reach out to you in different ways. So having them all is important. I visit far too many websites that don't have emails listed, that don't have phone numbers listed. Don't do that. Don't be one of those. Some people are old-fashioned and they want to pick up the phone. Even if that phone number just goes to a voicemail and you'll get back to them, that's fine. But if you do this, make sure that the message on that voicemail clearly and professionally states your organization and that they need to leave a message and their contact information, and you'll get back to them. Don't make it sound like it's an individual's personal voicemail or they're just going to hang up. They're not even going to leave a message. Having multiple forms of contact help add legitimacy and credibility to your organization. For example, not having a physical address makes your organization feel more nebulous. People want to know that you have a location. This helps build trust. Now, I understand not every organization, especially brand new organizations, are going to have this. So if you don't have it, what do you do? If you don't have a physical location, what do you do? Once again, this goes back to transparency. Simply giving a quick one-sentence answer under, you say physical location, one quick sentence that says, we currently do not have an office space, is better than nothing. This at least gives that feedback to the person visiting you and wanting to know how they can get in touch with you. So speaking of credibility, what other things should you include on your website to help build credibility with your visitors? Now, I included this little meme of this cute little kitten because I wanted to make a point. A lot of you serve very noble causes. You all serve very noble causes. Let's be real. You serve causes that are touching and that people connect with. But just doing that alone isn't enough to build trust for people that are visiting your website. You need to do more. First and foremost, transparency is imperative for nonprofits because you're executing your mission through the use of donor funds. This makes displaying your audited financials critical to building trust and credibility with potential donors learning about you through your website. There should be an easily located page on your website where all of your audited financials are displayed. Audited financials, 990s, annual reports, things of that nature should be there, should be located there. Second, pictures and bios of your organization's staff and board of directors help humanize your organization and help visitors and helps visitors to your site know who they're dealing with. Displaying your board of directors can be especially important because oftentimes these are known members of the community that come with credibility of their own. For someone interested in your organization, seeing someone that they know from the community sitting on your board, either in person or by reputation, it'll increase the likelihood of that person interacting with your organization in some positive way. Maybe they'll make a donation. Maybe they'll show interest in volunteering or even sitting on a committee. Or maybe they'll simply bring up your organization to someone else in conversation and mention that board member. All of these things are positive outcomes that are more likely when somebody feels that connection to your organization. Also, make sure that your nonprofit tax ID is prominently displayed on your website. Most websites have a footer section that appears at the bottom of every page on the site. This is a great place to include your tax ID number. This is where we include our tax ID number on the foundation's website. This is something that potential donors are going to want to see. Also, accreditations. If you have any kinds of accreditations, is another thing you really want to prominently display on your website to help establish credibility. A common location for something like this is towards the bottom of the homepage. It's intuitively where people are going to look for it. And finally, make sure you have a donate now button prominently displayed, and be very careful with using something like a pop-up. I advise against using pop-ups for donate now. I've visited websites where every single new page I went to had a donate now pop-up right in my face. And I probably don't have to tell you that the last thing I wanted to do was donate now after seeing that. So talking about credibility and trustworthiness of a website, I have to mention SSL certificates. This is going to be the most technical I get in this, what's a beginner course for communication and public relations. So bear with me, but it's important enough, I definitely need to mention it. So if you ever gone to a website and you notice there's that little lock symbol next to the website's name, and you'll see HTTPS, and some websites you'll go to and there won't be a lock, or maybe the lock will be unlocked, or there'll be a red exclamation point and it'll just say HTTP. This is because one of those websites has an SSL certificate. I can let you can guess which one that is. That's the one with the check mark here. And one of those websites doesn't. SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer, and it's the standard technology for keeping an internet connection secure and safeguarding any sensitive data that is being sent between two systems, preventing bad actors from reading and modifying any information being transferred, including personal data. SSL certificates create a foundation of trust by establishing a secure connection between client and server. SSL certificates can be acquired for your website and installed through your website hosting service. So that's who you'll want to contact if your site does not have an SSL certificate, to ensure that you can get one set up. It will cost a little money. They're not that expensive. It's usually an annual cost, usually like 25, 35, 50 bucks at most, usually not even that much, but it's definitely an important thing to have. So what happens if I don't have one for my website? What can happen? What's the bad that can happen? Well, misuse of data is going to be the first negative. All of the confidential information on your site could be accessed by bad actors. Downranking of your website is something else that can happen. Google has been working consistently over the years to encourage SSL encryption. In the absence of an SSL certificate, your website might be marked as insecure by Google and rated as not trustworthy, causing it to lose rank and fall in the listing of Google's search engine. A loss of trust as well. Websites that have that HTTPS are regarded to be more credible by your visitors. The public today is more aware of these kinds of security measures than ever, and they trust websites that are protected by an SSL certificate. If your website doesn't display a secure HTTPS padlock, there is a high possibility of losing potential donors, even if your donation portal itself is secured. It can also harm your brand reputation. If your website data is leaked or security is compromised by not having an SSL certificate, it can hurt your brand image. It will hurt your brand image. Even if no leak occurs, the lack of a secure HTTPS padlock will make your organization look less professional. It can also cause a display of warnings by search engines. So search engines such as Google could issue a warning to users who might be trying to visit your site and searching for your site that it doesn't have an SSL certificate. They may see warnings alerting them that their connection is not private. And some browsers might even refuse to display a site without an SSL certificate. It's definitely something you want to look into getting. So that brings me to the next poll, which is, does your organization have an SSL certificate? Organization's website, rather. Yes, no, not sure, or we don't have a website, in which case you need to work on that. But I'm sure if you don't have a website, you probably are, or will be after this class. I'm seeing mostly yes, which is good. a few not sure's. Really easy to check. Just go to your website and look in and see if it has that secure locked padlock next to the website's name, or in the website URL, if it has HTTPS, it has an SSL certificate. If it just says HTTP, it doesn't. Looks like we've got about 79. Looks like could probably stop the poll here. We'll share this one just really quick. As you can see, most everyone does. A few don't, a few aren't sure, and a few don't have a website. So again, certainly if you don't have a website, I'm sure you're probably looking into getting that set up for your organization, as it's pretty critical. So now we're actually going to jump over to, I have a guest speaker, Andrew Vonderschmidt, with the Mountain Democrat, as well as other notable organizations. I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to go over local press and print media.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm unmuted. Chris, just let me know you can hear me.
Yep, you're good.
All right. Awesome. I went ahead and listed a couple of other affiliations, not because I think I'm a Game of Thrones character and want to list every house I'm in, but just so that everyone here knows that I'm in the trenches too. I've been in the nonprofit field for 25 years. I just recently branched out into reporting as well. So that is why that is there. Chris, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So we're talking about reaching out to print media, local media. Some overall considerations are what makes your event or organization news? Who are you serving in the community, and how do you serve them? Some stories are easier to tell than others, or easier for an outlet to pick up than others. Say Big Brothers and Big Sisters, you know, everybody knows the organization, they know what they serve, how they serve their mission. It's an easy story to tell because you don't have to say a whole lot beyond the organization name. So what is your narrative and how does it engage our readers? Are you offering something unique or serving a beloved purpose? You know, I found like, kind of tongue-in-cheek in the nonprofit world, especially in the arts nonprofit world, which is where I usually reside. We say things like, you know, puppies and kids get all the funding or get all the stories, you know, in the newspaper. So you want to think about how you're serving your mission and how it is unique and how your purpose is important to the community. Next slide, please. So what's your goal? Obviously, you want to bolster your organization or your event or your event, but are you simply trying to write a release that will be printed or shared on social media or you know, buried on page 18 in the Mountain Democrat? Or do you want to get a reporter to come out and cover your story? This is going to kind of change how you contact your local print media. A press release is not an article. So if you're writing a press release, don't try to write it like an article. You know, things like, we sat down with Bob of this organization to talk about how they're doing this event. This is not how you want to write a press release. That's you're doing the job of the reporter at that point. I don't know that would get printed, is my point there. Please, next slide. So there's essential pieces to a press release that every press release should have. These essential pieces. You're going to have a headline. This is the first thing that the editor or whoever you're sending the release to will see. And if that's not telling you what this whole thing is about and engaging them immediately, they might not read further. That's what headlines are for, right? Right below that would be your quick summary. You're going to include a dateline. The standard kind of boilerplate stuff is, you know, where your organization is, what the date is of that press release going out, and then you start with your first sentence. You want to be pretty concise, pretty tight with your writing. So in as few words as possible, include all the W's: who, what, when, where, and why. But you don't want to list it. You definitely want to put it into a narrative of some kind. And then you want to put the date, location, and cost in it, if any cost. Information about the event. This is the date the event is taking place if you're advertising an event, not the date the release is being sent. So there's a difference between the date line and when your event is taking place. Next slide. So the body of the release, this is where your story is. This is how you're telling your narrative. So you're going to talk about the who, what, when, where, why, but with a little bit more language. You want to include quotes if possible. Quotes always help give your organization and your story a little more credibility. You can quote people within your organization, but if at all possible, can you quote somebody outside your organization talking about the event or organization you're advertising? And then your boilerplate. Everything you send out should have this. Just like Chris was talking about, this is a branding thing. You should have language about your organization that goes on everything you send out to any media. This should have your organization information, your mission statement, your tagline, anything that is part of your branding message. And you always want to make the closing clear. A declarative sentence, this story is over. we have ended it. And then this is just a formatting thing that is still alive and well, and that's those 3 pound signs, or as the kids call them, hashtags, at the bottom of the release. This tells the reader, the editor, there's nothing left, there's not another page, there's nothing missing. If you're sending it in the body of an email, sometimes you'll include a salutation below that. Thank you very much for reading, blah, blah, blah. You want them to know that that's not part of the release. The release is from the date line, or from the headline to the hashtag. Next slide, please. So this is some basic tips about press releases. You want to keep it simple and tight. You don't want to get too extraneous with the information. You don't want to get too flowery with your language. That's the job of the reporter. You want to restrict yourself to the facts. You don't want to make assumptive comments about your event or organization. Just state the facts. But don't leave out any pertinent information. Don't try to keep it so tight that you're leaving things out. So the main thing you want to do is get all of that information to the editor so that they can then decide if they want to send a reporter out and write a story. So don't leave anything out. Proof and spell check and proof again. I cannot tell you how important this is. Get someone else, a second pair of eyes to look at it. I have been writing for most of my life, and I ignore all of my typos because I know what that word is supposed to be. So having someone else look at it is key. And run your spell checks, your grammar checks. There's a lot of online sources to use, like Grammarly and things like that might help you out. But getting a second pair of eyes is super important and always the best way to go. Next slide, please.
For some reason, it doesn't want to respond. There we go.
Thank you very much. Oh, I need water. So you want to include a contact person with email and phone. Sometimes you're going to have public contact, like your main point of contact, your Chris of your organization, your communication specialist of your organization, and you might have a contact for the event itself. So make sure you make clear who is being contacted for what in your contact part of your press release. In that boilerplate, you want to make sure you have all of the organizational info that you can think of. You know, all of your address, phone number, website. You know, it's not listed here, but your Facebook, your Instagram, all of those things are nice to have there. When and where the event is taking place, the cost, deadlines, and early registration information. A lot of times, and I have been guilty of this in the past too, of writing a release and forgetting to put the deadline in there. And now I got people contacting me, when is this due? You know, so make sure you remember all of those important deadlines and early registrations and things like that. Next slide, please. Press release basics and tips. So I have to say that only children and fools speak in absolutes, but I will speak in absolutes. Always submit early. Allow enough time for a publication to respond. If you send out a press release 2 days before your event, it's probably not gonna get anywhere. Make sure you leave a lot of lead time. A couple of weeks is good, but the more the better. Include images if possible. You want to attach them separately, upload them. Some publications have their own upload forms on their website. If you go to the Mountain Democrat to submit like a news idea, there will be places to upload things. If you're sending it in an email, make sure that you send it as an attachment and include all of the caption information, who it is, where it is, when it was taken, and who took the photograph. And trust me when I say, if you do not give credit to the photographer is going to have heartburn. They deserve their credit too. And if you don't have any images to use for an upcoming event, perhaps you've done this. This is an annual event. Always use last year's photos. If you don't have that, find other ways to visually represent your event. If it's an adoption event, a puppy adoption event, well, go get some good pictures of your puppies, you know, and that'll sell right there. That's always great. Next slide, please. A warning, my earpiece just said battery low, so if you don't hear me, that happened, and I will adjust. So again, with the absolutes, never use stock photos or photos without permission. So don't go, don't say you're having a puppy event and just search Google and steal someone else's puppy pictures. We're looking for stuff specific to your organization. And if they pick you up as a story, they're going to send somebody out to take pictures of something. But if you're sending photos that you want to see get printed, make sure that they are of your organization, your event, your subject matter. And if you use unlicensed photos without permission, there could be trouble. Never embed images in text. In other words, don't try to lay out the story for the publication. A couple of things happens there. Word documents don't always open the same as how you built it, A. B, if you put it in a PDF, drawing that out of a PDF or a Word document, out of that to use in a publication, you end up with a lower resolution photo. That's creating more work for the editor, and you don't want to make an editor angry. So make sure that they're not in the text, they're not in your story, but they are attached separately. And don't Photoshop in images. Slight touch-ups are great. Do that, you know, brighten it up, increase the contrast, vibrancy on the colors, but don't alter photos. Don't cut someone out or get fancy with that kind of thing. It's a news source. It's not we're not looking for artsy photos. Next slide, please. Other tips. Use modifiers sparingly. Don't get crazy with it, but you definitely can use a few modifiers to make it sound a little bit better. And I gave a couple of examples here. The wholesaler was happy to return the favor. The glad wholesaler was completely happy to return the generous favor. That is a mess. but the wholesaler was happy to retain pay their generosity. That just gives it a little bit more um, uh, flavor to the whole to the sentence. Um, so don't overdo it. Basically, next slide, please. Avoid using all caps or caps where they don't belong. This is the same. This means the editor is going to need to rewrite your text, but also you getting back to what Chris was talking about the building your brand and the credibility of your brand. Doing the all caps or adding caps on words you think are important but don't really need to be capitalized, or using a lot of exclamation points in your writing does not come across as super professional, and it's going to get cut anyway. If they're going to print that, they're going to cut that kind of stuff anyway. And treat acronyms sparingly. I know we all know certain acronyms and we use them over and over again, but our readers don't. So we're going to write out the full name of whatever becomes an acronym at least the first time, if not multiple times, before we revert to an acronym maybe once or twice. Next slide, please. So yeah, back to using quotes. Use quotes when possible. If you can quote an individual about your event or your organization, it lends credibility, especially if you can get somebody who's got some, you can get Bill Roby to say something about your organization in your press release, that's gold, right? Or get Avis to give you a quote, that way we now know that other people in the community are behind this organization, and it has far a bigger reach, and that helps. It always does. Avoid declarative directives. You don't want to end a press release with, "This is the must-attend event of the year. You have to come." If you need to use something like that, get somebody to say it in a quote. You don't want to put that in just in the narrative of your story. And respond to the publications in a timely manner. If they have a question, if they have something that needs to be fact-checked or clarified, and they don't get that answer, your story is not going to get picked up, because that's one of the main things about writing for a paper that I've had to learn is, if we don't know it's true, it can't be in the paper. It's just, that's a fact of life. So respond to them. Next slide, please. Yeah, avoid dictating when a release will be published. Don't send a press release and say, "Our event is next week, so publish this on Monday." They got a job to do. They don't need us telling them when we want them to cover us, basically. Providing the date of the event or any of those early deadlines or any of that kind of stuff is plenty. But here, and this is why this is the last one, this is the most important thing, is get to know your editors and writers and learn what they need to get your stories published. Being easy to work with will always go a long, long way. If you end up with a reputation of someone that does not get back to the publication for the clarification on anything, or sending out press releases late and demanding they get published and things like that, it's going to be harder for them to want to work with you. But if you're always sending out stuff early, responding with them quickly, that's going to really help. One thing for sure is now, what did you say, Chris? There's like 79 people here. I have 79 new friends if I don't already know you.
I think I got 74.
So 74. So you all now have a friend at the Mountain Democrat. Andrew at mtdemocrat.com. Can't guarantee I'm going to be able to pick up your story. I'm not the publisher. I'm not the editor, but I can certainly pitch stories. But also get to know those the editors. Call the publication. Hey, what do you need? What can I do to get my story out there? The better you get to know them and the better they get to know you, the better relationship you will have with the local media. And, here's the bottom line. local media, Mountain Democrat in particular, but any local media, their job is to cover local stuff. That is their job, is to tell the community about what's happening locally. And if you are doing something locally, especially if it's serving the community, which is all 74 of you are doing, it behooves them to do it, and they want to do it. They want to publish it. They want to get your stuff out. So get to know them and help them make their job easier by getting stuff in on time or early and responding to the requests and getting everything to them in a nice, neat manner. So I don't know if I took the full 10 minutes that you allotted me, Chris. I could certainly do
no,
you know, a 5-minute song and dance.
No, I think you did great. We got about 15 minutes left, and I've got about that much content left. So I'm going to go ahead
Awesome.
and proceed with that. I will just answer really quickly. I did notice there was while everybody is responding to this poll, I did see a question come across for Andrew's email for him to repeat it. No need for that. I will send out Andrew's email contact with the material that I send out on Monday.
Thank you, Chris. I'll put it in the chat too.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, if you take a minute and respond to this poll, everyone. Andrew, you don't get to respond to this one. Have you ever had anything printed in the Mountain Democrat related to articles and stories and also press releases? So looks like we've got pretty good participation in this one so far. A lot of nevers. I'm seeing a lot of nevers, and that's actually surprising. So that's maybe now you'll have to make it a point to go ahead and submit some press releases and see if you can get the Mountain Democrat to pick up your story, and you can help spread your mission that way. So, and the other, I'll go ahead and stop and share this poll now. The other, and actually the highest is yes, both press releases and stories and articles. So that's actually really good to see. So we are getting a little pressed for time. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that one. Quickly jump over to my last poll. So it's ready, and I'm going to move on to developing your communication plan. So a fully fleshed out communication plan is going to incorporate all of the methods of communication already mentioned, including print media, social media, press releases, email correspondence, everything. It's a good idea to start the year by brainstorming the kind of messaging you want to put out to the community for that year. Are there particular stories you want to tell? A certain theme you want to follow? Doing this early on will help build consistency into your messaging for the year. This kind of messaging can be especially powerful if you plan to build it into the impact your organization has had. Showing success, that you're moving the needle, is critical to generating buy-in from the community. As mentioned by Avis, it isn't a bad idea to develop an internal calendar for this so that you can plan out when your communication, marketing, social media posts, event announcements, etc., will happen for anything from daily, weekly, monthly content to sending out messaging around big events and program deadlines. This way, everything is plotted out and structured in advance, and all you need to do is execute. Now, this doesn't mean you have to create all of that content up front. It'll definitely pay to be flexible as well and dynamic when it comes to your communication and your communication plan, as sometimes world events will force a change in course. COVID, and most recently the Caldor fire, taught us that adaptability is critical to successfully navigating a crisis, and communications are no exception to that rule. Another thing to always be thinking about, pictures and video are critical components of sharing your message. Kathy mentioned last week that they are also excellent additions to a grant application that will set you apart from other organizations competing for those same grants. So it's always a good practice to take photos and videos throughout the year and save them for future messaging and anything else that you can utilize them for. This can help you build that narrative early on in the year when you start building out that communication plan. It's always good to be aware of things going on around you too, within your organization's area of focus. Sometimes something will happen within the community around a topic that might need to be addressed, and you might want to put communication out about. As nonprofits, we're all community leaders, which means we will be looked to for our expert take on certain things within our wheelhouse. This might require a shift in existing communication plans. So while developing a plan and calendar are important, it is equally important not to lose the ability to be dynamic in your communications. And speaking of communications calendars, I do have a calendar template. I'm not sure if anybody's asked about this yet or not in the chat, but I do have a great calendar template that I'll send out in my materials that I send out on Monday. So the final poll, does your organization develop a communication plan each year? And does your organization utilize a communication calendar? So it's a two-part question. Make sure you go ahead and answer both. I'm seeing a lot of no's. Wow, this is surprising. It's about 60-40 no on the communication plan and about 70-30 no on the communication calendar. So
yeah, and I'm seeing in the chat, I know Diane just put in there, no, but I want to, exclamation point, exclamation point. And I see a not yet. And again, harking back to our past presentations, you know, I know a lot of you are using volunteers, and having that calendar and having that plan really allows your volunteers who might be doing this to plan ahead and know when they're going to be needing to prepare and be able to prepare in advance. So this is so critical, especially for those of you that use volunteers, to value their time and set things up in advance versus we need a press release next week. You know, having that forethought is just so important as far as organizational management.
I'll go ahead and quickly share that that poll. Again, like I said, 60-40 and 70-30. So yeah, a lot of no's, but hopefully this time next year, it will be a lot more yeses than no's. So go ahead and stop sharing that. And that is the last poll. So I'm going to go ahead and just move on to one of my last points that I want to make to everybody is, especially those of you who are sitting on communications or marketing committees or filling in those roles for your organization, don't get comfortable. Always be looking to up your game, never stop learning, and always be on the lookout for growth opportunities. Chances are anything that you want to start to learn to do, whether it be video editing, website design, photo editing, whatever, there's going to be thousands of tutorial videos out there that will walk you through the process from start to finish. There's also free open sourced software available that are virtually identical to most any paid software you can think of within this space. I've got a few great examples here. GIMP is the first one, which is a free alternative to Adobe Photoshop. It's a very powerful photo editing software, and the price is right. It's free open source software. It can be a little bit overwhelming to learn, especially if you've never used Photoshop before. And it does differ in the way that certain things are performed than Photoshop. So it may take some relearning if you have used Photoshop before, but there's great YouTube tutorials out there about it as well to help you learn. So stock photos. I know Andrew said, you know, be careful with stock photo usage and you want to use, you know, your own photos, but sometimes we do need stock photos to help build our message. And Pixabay is a website that's actually a great resource for high quality stock photos, videos, illustrations, and vector graphics. There's no watermarks, there's no sign up, and they're all royalty free. For video editing, Blender is a free open source video editing software that's very robust in its capabilities. Some other notable ones are Google Docs, which is a great free alternative to Windows Office software, and combined with Google Drive can allow easy collaboration between your communications committee members. Another online option, Canva, is a great design resource with a lot of free content available. There's some things that are locked behind a paywall, but you can still create great looking content using it. And it's web-based, so you can use it to collaborate with staff and committee members. This is just to name a few. There's free open source alternatives to virtually any paid software out there if you know where to look. All you got to do is search. Some of them are certainly better than others because there are multiple that occupy any given space. So it is a good idea to do a little bit of YouTube research on what it is you want to do and what's going to be the best for you. And of course, don't forget to utilize YouTube to learn the ins and outs of using your new free software. So I've got one last slide here, and it's a bit of an exciting one. So in building the marketing around this class series, we produced a podcast with the Nonprofit Podcast Network, and it was very well received. During the production of that podcast, I asked if I could offer the Nonprofit Podcast Network as a resource to all of you who are participating in this course. And the Nonprofit Podcast Network has offered to donate their time and production costs for any of you who would like to have your organization featured on their podcast. These are professional podcasts and are recorded in a studio in Citrus Heights. I'll send out the contact information for them along with the rest of the class materials when I send that out on Monday, if you'd like to contact them and arrange to have your nonprofit featured on their podcast. Additionally, the El Dorado Community Foundation is always looking for ways to support our nonprofit community here in El Dorado County as our partners. There's a number of resources that we have available on our foundation's website that allow you to request posts on our social media to help you spread your message to our audience as well as yours, list your upcoming events, maintain your nonprofit profile on our nonprofit directory, and to list your employment and volunteer opportunities. I'll make sure to send out a link to all of those resources as well. And now our latest endeavor in helping support the nonprofit community comes in the form of an article series that I'm writing called Nonprofit Spotlights. Each article will feature a different nonprofit organization and help bring community awareness to your organization and update the community about what you've been up to and what you have coming up in the future. So that's just some exciting stuff, some exciting news and some exciting resources. And it looks like we're right about on time here. So questions, comments, and if anybody has any successes in the marketing space, communication space they want to share, since probably most of the questions have been answered already in the chat, although I'll open up the chat here. And Avis, have there been any that either myself or Andrew?
There's one that actually Alice just put in. I've been told that using tools and then usage rights to find photos that are, quote, Creative Commons, unquote, is fine, or free stock photos. Is that true? Truly okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the differentiation is Andrew was mentioning regarding stock photos and the like, is that your message is better personalized. So if it's photos of that have been taken by your organization that are related to what your organization is doing, it's going to be better than a generic stock photo. But certainly those Creative Commons photos and free stock photos are totally fine to use and utilize. I wouldn't try to profit off of them. That might be a place where you would get into some danger area. But if you're just using them as visual enhancements to something, there's no issue with that at all.
You guys just, those of you that want to hang on, we can answer the last few questions, but I'm just going to go ahead for those that have to drop off. Remind you that class number 5 is next week. Cost accounting and basically accounting for nonprofits. So if you haven't signed up, make sure you sign up for that so you get the Zoom link. That will be number 5 next week, given by our in-house CPA Sakina Madraswala. So just wanted to get that out there that way in case anybody needs to drop off. But Chris, you have a couple more in here. Can you share an Instagram reel to YouTube?
I don't see why not. If it's so you've got an Instagram reel, right, that you've recorded, you've got that recording, you should be able to pull that recording and upload it to YouTube. I don't see why not. I have not experimented with Instagram reels. So I don't know for absolute certain if there is a way to pull that off. Maybe somebody else on here can assist with that. And I do see, Andrew, were there a couple questions that you
Yeah,
needed
go
to
for it,
unmute?
Andrew. Go ahead and unmute.
Answer?
Join us.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't want to just dive in there. I just figured it'd be quicker to do it this way than type. When I send a press release, I send it as an attachment, also in the body. Yeah, that's great. Oh no, that was Avis saying that. Our press releases sent as email attachments, absolutely, but sometimes you can also upload them on their on a website. Best way to include several photos, Alice, is attach them all as attachments in your email that you send to the editor. And you can find links to the editor on the website.
Yeah, I think on that one, Andrew, she was focused on the form, and the form only allows for one. So yeah, the way to get around that, Alice, is to send it to the editor at.
And now you know me too. So yeah, Avis, you're right. Sending in a flyer, Maureen, that's not going to really get published as a photo that accompanies the story. That is totally an ad. And someone asked about free ads. No, but there is a nonprofit rate. If you contact the ad department, they do have a nonprofit rate, and they will work with you.
Yeah, and I shared the media guide, and the rates are in the media guide that's on the Mountain Democrat
awesome,
website.
Thank you.
Chris, I'll put one on the spot for you, and it may be one you need to research because I'm going to put you on the spot. I did put a couple of resources in the chat about it, but accessibility for all. Are there any tools or anything that you suggest, for example, if you're trying to make your website more accessible for the blind, for the hearing impaired? Otherwise, I grabbed a few resources that offline real quick and threw them in the chat.
Yeah, that's not something I have looked into really at all. But it's a good, I mean, yeah. So I know that, I mean, there's definitely programs out there that that allow, text to speech that can assist individuals who are blind. Usually, I think that would be something they would have on the user side, not that would be on the client side, on the hosted on the website, or offered through the website, I should say. So something like that is going to be client side, or user side, I should say.
But I did throw a few resources out there. This is one that I knew would stump Chris.
Yeah, that's
because I know it's not something that we've talked about internally. So look, we get to learn because of this too. So I did throw a couple of resources out there, especially maybe for those that are colorblind. I noticed there was one there as far as checking your schematics and stuff with your colors that were in those two resources that I put out there as well.
Awesome.
Otherwise, I think we about got it all.
The only thing that I did not get to, and I will meet myself, is what are ways you can get to know the editors, writers? Call the newsroom. Just totally call our main number and say, "Can I speak to an editor?" And they will send you over to one of the editors and tell them your story. They're always there and wanting to hear from you. So do that, but also email me.
All right, Andrew, be ready to be inundated. All right. Well, I think, let me just click on those last two images. I think it looks like it's a lot of thank yous. So awesome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm sure we'll see some of you next week. If you're not the right person, make sure you loop in that person who should be representing your organization from a financial perspective. And we'll see you all next week. Again, the package will come out probably on Monday from Chris as usual, which will include the recording, the chat, and all the resources he said he would throw out there. So have a great weekend, everyone. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.